Hello there. Welcome to the Marriage Unmasked podcast today. Today we are picking up from where we left off last time about the energy that you bring to your marriage. Last time we talked about the masculine feminine dynamic, and today we are talking about how you can bring a victim energy to your marriage relationship. And I know that's something that we've struggled with from time to time. I especially have struggled with that victim mindset and bringing that into our relationship. And the victim mindset is really that you bring this atmosphere, this air that you are powerless to the circumstances that are happening in the marriage, or you're powerless in the relationship with your wife or with your husband.
Yeah, you will, and I think it's good to clarify. There is maybe someone who comes into the marriage already carrying this victim mindset around everywhere they go. It's kind of this poor me. Um, they're doing that, they're that, and I'm just the victim, right? Like I don't have any power here. And then there's also when you're in the marriage and maybe you're not carrying around that victim mindset all the time, but you sometimes do have that victim energy in the marriage. And we're going to kind of talk about both today. It's kind of that belief that circumstances that might happen in life or what your spouse is doing or their actions, their decisions, that's what's controlling everything. You don't have any power, right? It's them, it's all their fault, right? Or our house got burned down, and so now we are going to be out in the streets for the rest of our life, kind of like letting the circumstances and others dictate your life.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, in many ways, I came into our marriage with more of a victim mindset in general. And that was sort of the atmosphere that I grew up in, where you have this example of people who often they look at the circumstances of life and just feel powerless. So, I mean, in my house growing up, it was a lot of not a lot of like planning, not a lot of like problem solving necessarily for certain things that were going on, but just kind of looking at it like, okay, well, this is just how it is, and we're gonna just have to like trudge on through, and we're gonna have to work through this. And so I brought some of that energy into our marriage as well. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if we're having difficulty or whatnot, rather than having, you know, this idea of I can be a problem solver, I can come up with a solution, or I can pivot, I can grow, I would often come to the marriage relationship with this idea that, well, this is the way it is. What am I can't do anything to change it. Mm-hmm. Or, I don't have any power in the relationship. So I would think, oh, well, there she goes again. She's doing all these things that are making me upset or making me angry or whatever, and there's nothing I can do about it. That's just how she is, and I'm just gonna have to endure it. I'm just gonna have to just buck up, and I'll just kind of take the hits instead of realizing that I had power in the relationship and embracing that power, and that my voice mattered, and I could express it, and I could work towards changing, and I could problem solve. So that mindset really, it put me in a for many years, and still crops up often, is this idea that I can't change the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And for men, that is really the opposite of the energy of masculinity.
Exactly.
And so that was extra damaging to our marriage because for me to relax into him, I need to see a man who's strong, a man who can problem solve, a man who is not a victim. I mean, a victim, that's like the opposite of someone who's masculine, right? And strong and powerful. Yeah. And so that really fed into some big challenges for us.
And last time we talked about the honeymoon a lot, and that played out in the honeymoon as well, because I, rather than like pivoting and like problem solving our honeymoon environment and situation, I immediately went to, well, she doesn't like the room, she doesn't like where we are, like there's just nothing I can do about it. And so that mindset alone kept us locked in like unhealthy masculine feminine dynamic as well, where I wasn't taking lead, I wasn't solving problems or taking ownership of the decisions that I'd made.
Yeah, yeah. And what we see in so many marriages is how this really keeps you stuck, right? It's like we're just stuck. Like this is just the way it's going to be in our marriage, right? Or I'm stuck with him. He refuses to change. He's not, he doesn't want to work on our marriage. I can't tell you how many times I hear these things. I'm coming to you with a compassion because it is hard when you can't control your spouse, and so it is very easy to then allow yourself to kind of sink into this victim mindset in marriage, right? And instead of going to problem solving, instead of seeing where there's hope, or instead of seeing where there's an opportunity for growth, it's like I'm stuck, right? This is the way it's going to be, and that's such a hard place to stay, because without hope, man, yeah. So our hearts are, we have so much compassion for you if you are struggling this, but we want to help you to step out of this victim
Absolutely.
energy in your marriage.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's easy to, when you are feeling that way, when you're feeling this victim mindset, to kind of stay stuck in it instead of realizing where you do have power. And like you maybe can't control what they're doing. That's valid. You can't control what your spouse is doing, but you do have power over yourself. You do have power over how you can respond to the situation. And sometimes it just takes realizing that, instead of getting stuck in that loop of, well, I can't do anything.
It reminds me of the story in the Bible where Jesus he goes to Bethesda, the pool at Bethesda, and this man who has been, I think he couldn't walk for like 30 some years, so a long time. And he's at this pool. Isn't it like a healing water?
Yeah.
Healing waters.
Yeah.
And he's stuck in this victim mindset of like, well, nobody helps me, and
nobody helps me to get into this pool.
Yeah, I can't get into the water to get healed because nobody will help me. And the way Jesus approaches it, I think, is so great for us going forward. It's a great example for how to approach it for ourselves and in our marriage. Of like Jesus says, he's very firm about it. He says, "Get up." He very clearly tells him what he needs to do and empowers him with that too. It's like, you do have power. You can't, like, and I think he asked him, like, do you want to? I think first he said, do you want to get well? And that is a great question. So here are some, like, here's a question to ask yourself in your marriage is, what area in your marriage are you feeling powerless in?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. Are you having thoughts like, I can't be happy until he or she, blank does whatever. Are you thinking like nothing is going to get better? Or I always have to be the one who, blank, right? Those are just some examples of how it might be showing up for you.
Yeah, the victim mindset is always, it's a story that you're telling yourself. And it's an easy story to tell yourself. So to dig into that, and where am I telling myself a story like that, where I am painting myself as a victim in this marriage, or painting myself as powerless in some way in this marriage, and to really understand where are those points, and to understand them, and be aware of them, and then work on those things.
And so, kind of getting to that root, and just like Jesus did, like, do you want to get well, and really, like, because clearly Jesus knew something that other people didn't know, that this man had a heart issue. He had some thought issues that he was telling himself over and over again. And so Jesus cut right to the chase, right? He didn't mince words. He just, said it and helped that man to be empowered. And so I think that's really, that's really the direction you want to go for yourself as well in marriage. And again, this isn't necessarily something, and I know I've done this before, pointed out how Adam is being a victim time and time again. Like, wow, you're being a victim right now, or I can see that you choosing to be a victim right now, right? And I think you told me that's helpful at some point.
It's sometimes it's helpful for awareness, but what can also the tricky like the tricky issue with this particular like thought pattern is that you're stuck in this story that you're telling yourself that you're a victim. So anytime somebody's criticizing you or calling you a victim, you are almost ready to work that into the story so that it's like, okay, well, now you start to be a victim to that too.
Yeah, if you're
And that's
so
really
entrenched
and
in
that's
it.
really that's really not helpful. So it does take some compassion on and some clear communication. Sometimes it has to be firm, and sometimes more gentle and more compassionate to kind of like bring awareness to that, because sometimes I've needed awareness of it um, without criticism of it. So I think when you criticize it, if you're coming from a critical stand and saying, you know, you're just being a victim, you're just doing, like the tone and the way that it's brought up
Mm-hmm.
can be a more critical stance, and then that's not helpful because it there can be it can cause defensiveness to rise up, I guess.
And we don't want to ever give you more ammo to use against your spouse, right?
Right.
When we discuss things like this, even like the masculine family, like you're not acting masculine,
Right.
you're being a victim, right?
And that can be a thing that people struggle with, is weaponizing some of these things in the marriage to get to feel more powerful, to get your way or whatever. And that's never the goal. That's never the goal, is to weaponize some healing or some growth or some tools. It's really to be aware so that you can actually work on these things together, and that you can come at it from compassion and work on it as a couple instead of trying to change the other person.
Mm-hmm. So you shared a little bit about what caused your overall victim mindset. I want to talk too about what can cause victim energy in marriage, and I think the big key is when you're dwelling on past hurts without seeking healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this so many times, and I've seen it in myself too, right? Like we're not immune to these things, and I see this. It's, he didn't do this, right? From so long ago. He didn't do this, or he isn't the man that I hear this from wives. He's not the man that I thought he was. And so they are holding on to these past hurts. And then it's affecting them so deeply that it becomes, they become a victim to their own unhealed wounds. And so this is why we feel so passionately about really getting into healing. And even if you feel like I don't have trauma, or I don't have, it's amazing. We all have wounds that need healing. That's why we called our marriage course the Healing Your Marriage course, because it's not just about healing together. It's really about healing your own stuff. And that's why we encourage even, single people, or, if just the wife, if her husband's not ready, she can do the whole course, and get so many benefits, so much healing. Or if she's not ready, he can do the course, right? Because it's really about you individually healing so many of these wounds that are then causing you to show up in the way that you are. And so, when we don't heal these wounds, we end up, especially this victim energy, we can be resentful. There's emotional distance then in the marriage, unhealthy communication, so much unhealthy communication, because if you're a victim, you do passive aggressive kind of communicating, right?
Stonewall the other person because your defenses are going up because you think you're a victim. So you're like trying to basically defend yourself. It becomes a very self-centered mindset,
Yeah.
and that self-centered mindset creates disconnection instead of connection with your spouse. Because your walls are up, you're going to get angry, you're going to have outbursts, you're going to, like we said, stonewall, use passive aggressive communication, things like that, that are just causing hurt and distance instead of the connection that you really deep down want in the relationship.
I mean, really, what happens is the victim, the person who's seeing themselves as a victim, they end up placing all the weight on the other person. And so when this has how this has played out for us in our marriage is, and I have had a victim energy at times as well, but it's mostly then it's shown up very powerfully for Adam.
Yeah.
And so it has left me feeling this heavy weight that I have to problem solve for every single thing that comes up
In the marriage
or even for our family. If something happens and Adam is just kind of like a deer in headlights, I don't, what's going on behind that is all this victim stuff, probably, insecurity, things like that. But so it's left this heavy weight on me to have to fix, problem solve for everything.
And that's a really unfair burden to place on Kara, especially, and that again, that affected the masculine feminine dynamics so much, because as a man, you want to provide a safe place and a strong place and leadership and vision for your family. And if I am looking at all the circumstances and throwing up my hands in the air and saying, I can't do this, I can't, like I'm constantly in that mindset, well, look, I'm a victim of circumstances. Well, that creates so much, like Kara said, just such a burden on her to be the problem solving and to come up with things. So it's definitely worth working on and getting to the root cause, especially if that's something that you struggle with.
Yeah, and I think that's really the first step, right? In moving away from the victim energy is doing the healing, doing that reflection. And we want to give you some other action steps as well. First of all, action steps for someone who recognizes this victim energy, and then we're also going to give you some tips if your spouse is struggling with this. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing for the person who's struggling with victim energy is to take ownership.
Yes.
If I could put that in all caps with like 100 exclamation marks after, that's what I would do.
That's so huge. And there's a good Bible passage for that. It's Galatians 6:4-5 says each should test their own actions without comparing themselves to someone else. Each one should carry their own load. And so if you're stuck in a victim mindset, you need to recognize that you are responsible for the story that you're telling yourself, and you are responsible to recognize that you have more power than you're giving yourself credit for.
Yeah, I mean, what a great feeling, right? Like go from this feeling of like I'm the to like I have power. I can choose something different.
Right, and something that helps if you are somebody who gets stuck in that victim mindset and that victim story is to really be active about checking in with yourself about that, and really, doing some of the reading and the personal growth. Some of the resources on our marriage guide are actually very good for some of this work as well, some of this inner healing. But throughout the day, like you can catch yourself, that awareness, you catch yourself, I'm in a victim mindset here. This is what's going on inside of myself. Maybe it's a time to take a little reset. You take a little break. You sit with God. You get some perspective and some reality, and you remember who you are, because a lot of times the victim mindset stuff has to do with your identity. It has to do with who you are, and when you're kind of out of the identity of I am a loved, saved child of my Heavenly Father, that my Father accepts me and loves me, and He has great things for me, and He's also made me a powerful individual. He's given me gifts and talents, and He's given me a voice, and He wants me to use these things. And so to remember that. So sometimes it's good to just check in with yourself, to take that break, kind of reset, say a prayer, and to reflect on some of those things, that's who you really are, and then to come back out with that renewed sense of power and, you know, ready to solve some problems and take some action.
Yeah. Another great tip is to reframe the struggles that you're going through as opportunities for growth, right? So, like, let's say that you are struggling with, maybe you struggle with porn, right? And, or, and that is a valid issue to struggle with. And, instead of seeing yourself as this, this is who I am. There's nothing I can do about it. And just replaying those things over. See this as an opportunity for growth. You can grow. You have the opportunity to then encourage others who have struggled with this as well. Like there's so much amazing growth for you. Um, that somebody else who doesn't struggle with that particular thing, and it doesn't have to be something like porn, it can be something even smaller than that. Or less impactful, and it still is an opportunity for amazing growth. And so reframing that in your head and just seeing a bigger picture, and just like Adam was saying, just seeing yourself as valuable, and that really helps you to reframe that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then also practicing gratitude. I think this is so huge. And it is a practice, right? It's not just something that once in a while, like, yeah, I'm grateful for, my family. I was at a point in, this was in a low point in our marriage, actually, because, marriage stress affects every part of your life.
Yeah.
And I was feeling really, just low overall. And I struggled with even wanting to be a mom. And at that point, I think we had 4 kids.
Yeah.
And so, and they were all little. And I was struggling so much. I remember writing in my journal one day, I don't want to be a mom anymore. And that was like a big wake up call to me, like, oh my goodness, like,
such a low point.
you must be hurting so much to feel that way. And I started working through this book, A Thousand Gifts by Ann Voskamp, it's one of my favorite books, because it helped me shift things so hugely. It was like a huge catalyst for change for me. And it is all about practicing gratitude. And I've just made lists every single day, just constantly making lists of things that I'm grateful for and different things every single day. And it just changed my perspective hugely. Instead of the victim energy that I was bringing, that then was like, poor me, these kids, take so much out of me, all these thoughts going through my head, I was able to see my kids and see motherhood in a different perspective. And it changed so much for me there.
Yeah, gratitude is so empowering when you practice it. It is an empowering practice, and it opens your eyes, and you can't stay a victim if you're grateful. When you're grateful and you see what good things God has done, and you're grateful for who you are as well, and what the gifts that you have, you can't just stay in a victim state.
Yeah. So what if your spouse is really struggling, right, with this victim energy? I think one important thing is to set boundaries, right, without enabling self-pity. So you're
It's a tricky thing
yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
but it is possible to do.
Yes. And I think the key, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, is like that truth in love, sharing like this is a boundary for me. And but sharing it in a way where it's not accusatory. It's not like, because you are always being a victim, now I have to set this boundary. It's more of this you have compassion, you have love, they can feel that energy, right? That's a totally different energy. When and you don't have to say I love you for someone to feel your energy of love and compassion, right? They know. Just like you don't have to say I'm a victim for people to know that you are bringing some victim energy.
Exactly.
And so setting those boundaries, that's really important. And another one is, I kind of just touched on it, but leading with kindness while refusing to carry the whole burden, right? When I felt like I was carrying the whole burden, I wasn't often leading with kindness because I was overwhelmed. I felt drained. I was resentful. Like, why do I have to come up with a solution every time we have an issue? Why am I always the one who's, working on fixing these things or even interested in fixing things? And so that actually kind of led to my own victim energy, honestly.
Mm.
And so, if I would have refused to carry the whole burden, right, and express that with kindness, like, you know what, I would like you to come up with 3 solutions for this, or I'd love to hear what you come up with as we work through this issue, right? Just expressing that in a respectful, kind way. And I know it's not easy. A lot of these things are so much easier said than
Absolutely.
done, which I think is why it's very helpful to talk this through with someone else. Like, this is why our coaching clients have so much success, because they're working through this stuff. We can work through, everybody's different, right? Your situation's different than our situation. And so to have somebody to talk through your unique challenges can be really helpful. And then I don't want to, what's the word? Put a lower priority on this, because this is so important. But the last thing is to pray about it, right? And,
When you pray for your spouse in that situation, it'll shift your perspective, and that prayer is powerful too. And God does work through that prayer to really work on the whole situation and make it better.
And just maybe sometimes even praying for yourself to accept your spouse, to continue to have patience and kindness, because it can feel really hard when someone has a victim energy that they're bringing. That is a big challenge. And so just praying for your own, your own reactions to that, and your own respect, your own, because it's really hard for me to respect
Absolutely.
Adam when he brings that kind of energy. And so just, I think prayer for both is involved. And if you can also, be so bold as to pray out loud over your spouse and speaking those words of life over them, like, you are this, you are, you are chosen, you have so much power already, you can make wise decisions, you can, and just praying that over them out loud even.
Yeah, the spouse can actually be a conduit of God's truth in those kind of situations, and can remind the spouse who's stuck in this victim mentality, it can be a powerful reminder of, oh goodness, that's where I'm at. Like, you can realize it, and then you can also realize the truth. This is who I really am. This is who God says I am. And the more that you pray over that, it can shift things a lot.
So we hope this was so helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you guys want to email us or send us a message, we'd love for you to share this episode on social media, tag us, because we would love to hear your thoughts. But we'd also love to pray for you too. If you're struggling with this, reach out. We are happy to pray for you.